Hello, welcome to Queendom TV, and today we're going to be discussing why so many people in groups, so many artists, so many pop groups decide to go solo. And a lot of you guys, some of you guys have mentioned this in the comment section. I've been thinking about making this video as well, and I want to open that door and have this conversation with you guys today because I feel like so many of the things that we've been talking about can really hint at why these things happen. And so we're going to talk about that. Now, unfortunately, for a lot of us, you might be a fan of a particular group. It could be One Direction, you might be Little Mix, might have been Take That, could be a K-pop group, could be BTS, could be Blackpink, could be all sorts of different people, right? There's so many groups, fantastic groups. Sugar Babes, I used to like, who was that group I used to like? There was Sugar Babes, and there was also the Saturdays I used to really like. All these different groups, right? And a lot of times these groups actually split in the end. Now I want to talk about why I think that happens. There's so many different reasons for so many different groups. And if you guys want me to talk specifically about a particular group, let me know in the comment section down below if you want me to discuss / research why a particular group split and get more into that. I'm going to be talking about that with Fifth Harmony already. I've spoken about Little Mix, we've been talking about as well. So you just always feel free to let me know if there's anybody specifically. But I think a lot of the time there's many different levels to it. I think one of the reasons why a lot of groups split is because of Hollywood, of course, because of the industry, because a lot of the groups that are out there were never actually being cultivated or helped to actually succeed for themselves or thrive as a group, but more just to be able to sell records and do tours and do music videos and make money for the gatekeepers of Hollywood. And so I think for a lot of them, even the groups that were put together, like, you know, the One Directions and groups like that, I think that if they had been supported as a group more, if they had helped with the chemistry and stuff like that, they might have actually chosen to stay together, as opposed to split, you know, eventually. But I think there was so many pressures put within a lot of these groups, either the ways that they had to perform, things that they had to do, that eventually added to them having issues internally, or even being put up against each other. As we know with Fifth Harmony, they had to battle between each other to be on verses, to the extent that they had to they didn't know who was going to be who would actually get the part until they actually heard the song after it was done, you know, which is pretty crazy to me, right? So that's putting the girls, you know, against each other. I think in other scenarios, you can see that where there's really good chemistry, the groups tend to last a lot more. You saw this with the Spice Girls, of course. Jerry Halliwell stepped away. But then again with her, you know, but now the girls are still very close to this day, as you can see, all 5 of them. But I think one of the reasons why Jerry even stepped away, again, was the pressures. It was the pressure of doing this, because remember, if you're in a group, right, we all respond differently to different things, right? Even if we all go through the same exact particular traumatic event, we could all be traumatized, but we might all respond to that trauma differently, and we might all rate that level of trauma differently. And I think this is something that happens in groups where they all are exposed to the same negative things, sometimes also positive as well. And I think there's the positive element of, which I'll talk about next, but different things, and how they respond to that might be different. So for example, all of the girls in the Spice Girls might have been feeling the pressure of doing all these performances and everything just taking off. But maybe for some of them, their way of coping was they had a different way of coping, and just going along with it. Maybe some of them were doing really badly and they were thinking of leaving themselves. And then after Jerry left, they said no, you know. So I think there's different ways that different people deal with things. Some people in groups, I think once they're in the group, rather than it affecting them negatively in the sense of destroying them and causing issues, they realize, wow, I actually believe in myself even more. Now I feel like I can continue on solo as I always wanted to, which I think a lot of people always wanted to be solo. Because the thing with groups that we've got to understand, that I think about a lot, is in order for you to be in a group, you have to really want to be in that group for that group to last. Because that everything about being in that group, you're all going to be doing stuff together, you know what I mean? And it's not been normalized ever that people do like have a group where they have like a mixed album of like maybe some solo songs and some mixed songs. I think that'd be really cool, by the way. Love to do that. Would love to work on something like that myself. But like, I don't think people I don't think, if people don't really get to tend to do that, usually when you're in a group, you end up having to represent a brand, which I don't like, as I've said. And that's why I liked what the Spice Girls did. I liked, although I'm not a fan of them, as you guys will know, you can check out that video, but I liked that they decided to make part of their brand being individuals, you know, who were together and emphasizing that, rather than it being like, let's all have the same look, which is what I think happens with a lot of groups, that especially in the industry, because the industry likes to work one way and they have a method that works and they go with it, which is have the group basically have no individual personality or identity, but just have an identity as a group, and then get famous and whatever. I think that because that's how it works, that's what they promote for a lot of these people, and therefore that means that, you know, for a lot of them, they never get to be, you know, a soloist or have their own individuality, which I think that also ends in why people end up leaving groups, because maybe they're not able within the framework of their label or whatever to actually just be a soloist. And maybe if they would have been allowed, they would have done some solo songs and also some songs with the group, you know. And I think also society has a slight role to play in that when you see somebody doing solo stuff, people wonder like, oh, are they leaving the group? Are there problems with the group? So that maybe there's a little bit of an element that it's difficult to do that. But I personally feel that for me, if I supported a group, I would be happy for them to be doing their solo songs and also their group songs. I think that would be amazing. I kind of wish we'd had more of that with a lot of groups. But I feel like for so many of them, a lot of them go through so much negative things, whether it be the pressures of the labels, whether it be the contracts that they've signed and stuff, that they don't want to continue even doing stuff still with the group, because maybe those relationships are shattered. And I think what a lot happens in a lot of groups is when they are getting to whatever stage, maybe let's say somebody's now ready to leave or things are getting too much for everybody. As I said, people respond to that differently. So I think some of them might be like, I think when they're all dealing with however they have to cope with what's happening, it means that they're all going to feel differently about what they want to do to as a solution to that. So and it can cause issues even within their relationships, because some of them might think, well, I feel like we should have just worked harder at this. If we just worked a bit harder, the label told us that in a year's time we could start making our own music, because obviously people say stuff like that and they could be lying, right? People lie. This is why I love God, because God tells the truth and God is only truth. So praise the Lord for that, right? But people can lie, you know. And so one person in a group might be like, well, I think we should stick it out. Like they could all go through the same thing. They could all be unhappy, right? And they could be like, well, I think we should stick it out. Somebody else is like, well, I think we should go solo. The other person would be like, well, I want to do this. One thing that stuck out to me about Fifth Harmony that I found quite interesting was Dina, because you don't hear so much about Dina from Fifth Harmony. And the thing that stuck out to me about her, and let me check because I've actually written it down here in my planning notes or whatever, and she talked about, you know, when Fifth Harmony was splitting up, she was actually nervous to go solo with no experience of writing music for herself. And I find that this is something I think happens in a lot of groups as well, and why we might see some certain people do really well and not others, because again, different people respond differently to different things. Within Fifth Harmony, she was feeling like that. She never got the opportunity to practice songwriting and stuff. So now when she's going solo, she might not even have been comfortable with the group wanting to write for themselves, because maybe even at that point, she wasn't used to it. So she maybe feels somewhere inside of herself that she doesn't know how to write songs anyway. So it's better for her to be in the group. But maybe if she was comfortable with songwriting or had the experience that she should have been able to have doing songwriting, then maybe she would be able to... she would be more interested in still, you know, in the group, or going solo now herself and doing more music, etc., etc. So it just goes to show you, right, that different people are going to respond differently. You know, Camilla decided from Fifth Harmony, she was out. She was like, I'm gone. In the end, she went and did her thing. She went and made her music. You know, Lauren has come out and has been speaking more about how she's going to be doing more intimate stuff, writing the music she wants. Ali's got a podcast now. She's been even singing worship music. You know, Normani's doing her own thing now. She had a song with Cardi B. So I think for a lot of them, when you see what people split up and do in groups a lot of the time, they tend to go back to their individuality and things that would have been from them, especially these groups that are put together, like even One Direction and stuff. You find that they go back to probably what was similar to what they actually did when they first wanted to be an artist. And I think that had they been allowed to do that more, a lot of those groups wouldn't have split up. And even when it comes to like a lot of these K-pops and stuff like that, groups and stuff, you guys got to I did a whole a whole mini series about K-pop versus J-pop, and you guys should check that out. And in there I talked about the history of both K-pop being Korean pop and J-pop being Japanese pop, right? And I talked about how for K-pop artists, they are very much groomed to be what they are. Like they are, like from young, they are trained up in order to be able to dance and sing and everything from a young age. So they're very much manufactured like products, right? So again, for a lot of those people, as much as we might support those groups and love what they do, as they become older, because I think when people become older, especially because a lot of these groups came together when they were young, or maybe they were young in industry, maybe not necessarily young in age, but young in terms of the industry, they don't really know how to navigate things. And everybody makes it seem, a lot of these Holly weirdos make it seem like, oh, you need us to be able to understand this, which to some extent you do have to be educated. It's one of the reasons why I talk about a lot of stuff on here for anybody who wants to be in the entertainment industry, so that any of us in the entertainment industry don't have to, can be knowledgeable when navigating that area, you know. And so always feel free, by the way, to reach out to me about anything if you ever have any random questions. Not saying that I always have the answer, but I'm always happy to help or help you on your journey to research and stuff, especially if it means protecting you from dodgy contracts. But because people are young or young in industry, you know, you kind of need people to help. But once people have had experience, and that's why I think a lot of people leave in groups, that's another reason, is because they get to the point where now they actually know how the industry works and they can do stuff for themselves. Now they have a producer, maybe like a music producer that they like, that they support. Now that may have like they know what management is and how to get an agent and how to, you know, book a tour and stuff like that. So I think that also plays into it, that initially they were saying yes because they felt they had to say yes to everything because they didn't have any options and they didn't know anything. But now when they do know some stuff, they're like, okay, actually now I don't have to just go along with everything that I'm being told. I can actually choose what I want to do and what I don't want to do. And I think that also factors into why we start to see a difference in groups and why they change or why they leave, because now they're like, okay, now I can just do what I want to do and not have to be represented in that group anymore. And again, maybe if they'd been able to do that before, they wouldn't feel the need to leave the group. I also do think that there are things that happen in Hollywood. I think it's a very polarizing industry to be in, because you're going to find the higher you get, the more you're going to have to choose what side you want to sit on. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, with the way that it is right now, with the current gatekeepers as they are, a lot of them, if you don't side with what they want you to do, with what the label wants you to do, with what producer, director, whoever, you know, model, scout, whoever wants you to do, they're going to make it so that you can't be in that industry. And so I think that can be very polarizing for groups, because if you're not all on the same ball game, like let's say you're a group and you're not happy with the label, if you're not all happy to say, forget the label, we're going to go independent, and one of you doesn't want to do that, or two of you doesn't want to do that, you're not as easily able to do that as a solo person. So that might push a solo person to be like, you know what, I'm going to go out from this because I don't want to have to be in all of this. Whereas it takes a lot of them, it would have to take all of them to make that decision together in order for the group to stay together and also leave. And again, this is something that happened with the Spice Girls, because what happened early with them, they didn't get their contract, did they? And then they hadn't signed a contract, which worked out in their favor, which is why one of the reasons I think contracts have become so important, you know, in the entertainment industry. And I kind of touched on that in a video, though I may touch on that in another video. Sorry guys, I'm just writing something down quickly. So what happened with them? Was that when they decided to they wanted to work with somebody else, Jerry went back to the other girls and said, girls, are you happy to work with the writers alone if it's just us, without our previous guy who was like kind of our previous manager? And they said yes. They made that decision as a group, so they were able to do that as a group, and she went there on behalf of the group. So again, it just goes to show that if you can all be on the same page, have that chemistry, have that bond and everything, then it can work, and you may want to stay together for longer. Like the Spice Girls, as much as they've done solo stuff, they still do their group stuff, and they still say they want to do more. You know, Mel B is still talking about, I want to bring us together, we're just trying to convince Posh to do it, you know. And again, that's the other thing with groups as well, is that people tend to criticize groups. The Spice Girls experienced that a lot. I think that's another reason why people leave groups. I think that's actually the reason why Posh isn't coming back into doing the Spice Girls, because she received so much hate, she received so much criticism from people, because for some reason we as human beings are just so toxic that we always have to like compare people, you know, in groups, and say, oh, this one is like, it's like with Jessie Nelson and Little Mix, she was called, like, people called her the fat one, you know. With Posh, I think she experienced some of that, people calling her, and that's why I think she is so dedicated now to staying so slim, you know, in this day and age, because of stuff that's happened in her appearance. So many of them have so much work done, you know, cosmetic surgery. Why? Because people compare them. People talk about the different group members. This person's better at singing. That person was not so good. This person could definitely have a solo career. This person could never. You know, a lot of them experience a lot of comparison, which also drives people out of groups. That's what Jessie talked about. She said being compared to the girls and having to live up to being with the girls was one of the biggest reasons she left. If she could have just been comfortable with her being herself and not the pressures of being compared or having different body types, etc., it might have been different, you know. So I feel like a lot of them, another reason why they actually leave people leave groups, the groups don't stay together, is also that the comparison, either from themselves internally, within the group, within the Hollywood industry, or from us, you know, the ones who are watching and supporting, you know, saying stuff online. Because if you imagine, if you keep being told that, like, oh, they don't even need you in the group, you can't even sing, that might lead you to not want to be in the group. But then that person might be really key to the group. And I think this is the thing that we notice, and why a lot of groups, once one person leaves, they completely break apart, because the group worked when it was all of them together, a lot of them, right? And so when the one person leaves, it's just not the same anymore. And as much as you might try, right, it just might not work out for you anyways, you know, because you don't have that person's voice, you know. And especially when it comes to singing and all of this stuff, and you got to get different voices at different levels, and all the harmonizing, all that stuff. You can't just be, those things are things that people work on and they perfect over time. That's why a lot of the best groups, the ones who do last, are the ones who actually wanted to be a group, who formed themselves and who practice themselves. They have those things, you know, within themselves to be able to do, and so they last a much longer time. And also because they wanted to, because a lot of groups, as I said, maybe people get into groups because it's easier. I think it's one reason why people leave, or I guess the last reason I'll mention in this video, is because maybe when they joined the group, it was because really they always wanted to be solo, but this is just the way they thought they were going to be able to break into the industry. And so once they do have that kind of level of fame or power or whatever, or even money, just to be able to pay for the stuff that they want to do, then they step away when they're finally able to do that, you know. So maybe that was always their intention, or maybe being in that group and having all that attention and seeing how loved they were was the confidence boost they needed to embark on their solo careers. So yeah, you guys let me know what you think, why people groups split up, and other reasons that I haven't mentioned. Let me know other reasons I haven't mentioned. Let's just talk about it in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe, of course, to my channel. If you haven't before, you should do it now. If you've been watching my videos and you haven't been subscribing, what are you doing? I'd really appreciate it if you guys did. Don't forget to hit the like button as well if you did like this video. I would say hit the dislike button, but YouTube decided we're not doing that, because I don't care if people want to dislike. Hey, that's up to you. That's your prerogative. Do you know what I mean? But hey, YouTube's taken that away, because our freedom of speech is being taken away. And on that note, God bless you all, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye-bye.